Hey guys, how you doing? Haven't done a video in a while, but I'm back to my van, and of course I did a whole series of videos on my van and my trip. And now that I'm back working on some art, and I always wanted to install one of these isolation units, so I'm going to show you how I did it. This is the lithium BIM 225, as you can see on the screen there. So I'm going to go over real quick how I did this. There's a few different ways to do it, but I'm going to tell you how I did it in my rig. And I'm fortunate here because my battery system is right behind my driver's seat and covers up with a panel right up here. So go over this BMI real quick in case anybody gets confused. Hopefully I can clear something up for you. Okay, what you have is this hooks up to your positive battery, chassis battery cable. This is the chassis lead, and I shrink wrapped pink on it, so to let me know. So I used two double aught cable for this because my batteries are wired with that. So I went with that. Calculations actually showed you could go a smaller wire and a smaller fuse. I went with 200 amp fuses, but I went ahead and went with the 200 amp fuse. Matches up nicely with the 2-aught wire. It's only 7 feet of 2-aught going to my battery chassis, and maybe another 11 inches going from my the coach batteries that go over here to my positive bus for my coach batteries. Okay, to show you what I did. Okay, you got the first bolt here, which is your ignition. Your middle one is ground, and this one they call the SIG, which is basically a momentary switch. So, covered all the terminals. This is how I wired up this one. This is so they tell you to hook this first one, this ignition, up to your ignition. So when you turn your vehicle on, it will energize, your alternator will feed back and charge both your chassis battery and your house batteries. I've never really had a problem running down low on power. I only did once because I left this 5,000 watt inverter on, which will drain your battery after about 7 hours. So what I did, instead of hooking this up to my ignition, I hooked it, and as you go up, my wiring goes up to this panel up here. So I got a ground bus, and what it says is obviously ground your ignition wire, and we're talking about that little bolt, the ignition bolt, and I hooked it up to one of my switches here. So they say that if your alternator's not big enough, what'll happen is in traffic, if you're not moving, the alternator will heat up, and you could burn out your alternator. It's possible if you're in stop and go traffic, or you're just idling. So I wanted to be able to control that. I didn't want if I turn my vehicle on, I want to be able to control if the alternator is charging my batteries or not. So that's why I put it on a toggle switch up here. So if I ever in stop and go traffic, or I get out of stop and go traffic, I want to turn it on to charge my batteries up, I can just come up here, flick the switch on, and this ignition, like I said, it's a ground wire for like I say, ignition, and then you hook it up the hot to your switch. So just like any other type of switch, you got a ground and you have a hot or positive. And obviously you want this fused with 5 amp, and that's what I have in my panel that I just showed you, is a 5 amp fuse that is wired to this wire right here, which goes to the switch. Okay, the middle one is just your ground, and I just ran that right up to the bus. I have a bus up there. You could obviously run it back to here, but I didn't want to make a lot of wires here. So that's how the ground just goes to ground, and it grounds for the switch here. So it works. And then you have they call this the SIG, which is basically a momentary switch. And this switch is basically an inline switch. And what it is if you can see it here, I just got a push button switch. Hopefully you can see it right here. It's just a push button. You push that, and what this will do, this unit this lithium BMI will jump your chassis battery. If your coach batteries are charged, it will jump that. So if I'm sitting in the front seat here, like right here, all I got to do is reach back with my left hand and push this switch, and with my right hand I can turn the ignition key on, and it's momentary. You just push it, start it, and let it go. So that's what they call it the SIG, but it's a momentary switch is what they want you to wire. And this is just wired in line, if you can look at the switch. So you go from this lug to your momentary switch, then your momentary switch comes out and goes straight, and the red wire goes to the ground bus. And it's that easy. Okay. All right. Or I should say the blue wire. I'm sorry. It's the blue wire here, which goes to ground, and the red wire goes to switch. So not to confuse you. So for this SIG, for the momentary jump, goes to the momentary switch, push button, and then on the other lead of the push button, you bring it back to ground. And I guess inside this unit, it makes the connection and connects full power from your house batteries to your chassis battery to jump your vehicle. Now, of course, if your chassis batteries are dead, it's not going to do anything. And usually on these rigs, as you know, these batteries pull around 750, maybe 800 amps to start the vehicle. So you're probably going to need a pretty good charge on your house batteries in order to jump your vehicle and jump the resistance on your chassis battery. One other thing I did to this, they recommend a fuse on your chassis battery side, but I went ahead and I put one of these inline fuses here, which you can get fairly easily at O'Reilly's or any shop. These are these flat fuses, so I just hooked the fuse up on both ends, one on this end and then one on my chassis battery, and I'll show you that in just a second. So so far it seems to work, but I just did it, and I should have done it a long time ago, because if you're not going to use your rig like 2 or 3 weeks, then obviously your chassis, if you have solar, obviously your house batteries are going to stay charged if you park outside, but your chassis battery is going to get drained. And actually that happened to me, and you know, these chassis batteries on these rigs aren't cheap. So that's what I did. Now let me show you. This was actually the easy part. The hard part was hooking it, getting it, configuring it to the chassis battery. Now I'm going to show you that, and that took some doing. I'll show you how I did it. So let's go out and look at the chassis battery. Come around here and show you how I did this. And this took quite a while. I had to remove the driver's seat here, and hopefully I can show you here with a little bit of light here. So this is the fuse for it, and it's one of those Bay Marine fuses. It's right angle, and the problem with these are, I'm going to lift this thing up. So here's your setup. Well, I wanted to originally hook it up to the bolt down here on the cable, but it won't work. There's just not enough room. The stud on this is actually too long. I actually even cut off 3 threads, and I still couldn't fit it here to where I was comfortable running this big 2-watt cable coming around here, and I was going to bring it down through this step cover, underneath the step cover. Just didn't have enough room with all these wires in here. There wasn't a channel that I could use, so I had to remove the seat. That's kind of a pain in the ass, because you know, you got this brake lever here. They have T40 Torx, 3 of them you got to take out to be able to get this seat out. But after that, it's fairly easy. But anyway, back to this fuse. So what I had to do is, and of course they have a fuse in here, a battery for your whole system fuse. And this is like a 900 amp, 1200 amp fuse. I actually had to look it up. It's not even written on here. I had to look that up to find out what amperage. I was thinking I could use that, but you can't. It's too high. So they recommend the 200 amp fuse. They have a calculator on a website. You can try to figure out the amps, the max amps, and what you should fuse it at, depending upon your alternator draw. So I actually cut about probably a 1/4 inch off of this bolt right here, because as you see, and I actually had to remove this fuse, bring it up so I could set this fuse below, because when you put your pad on it, it would rise up and give you a lip here, and you wouldn't be able to fasten the cover on this, your floor cover, because there'd be a bump in there. So what I did is I went ahead and cut the bolt down, had to recess that the fuse, and once again, it's hard to see, but this is an L-shaped fuse, and on these rigs, this is a ProMaster 2500. On these, you have 2 bolts here, and this wire here is part of your rig, and it goes, usually just fastens to that. So I took this off, put this down below it, and put the fuse on top, or put this fuse on top, and then laid the other fuse on it. And that barely, I mean, just barely gave me enough room. Now, what I had to do, I had to cut this cowling out, this battery, part of this battery compartment out, because obviously this 2-aught would set too high up. It would set too high up on this, and it wouldn't allow you to put the mat wouldn't lie flat. So I had to cut that out. And another thing, if you're going to do it like this, you also have some cutting on the edge of this, because this cap has these little notches on it, and had a little notch right here that I had to cut off. That usually covered this right here, where this is, it would cover it, keep water off or whatever. But I had to cut that little tab off, and then I had to cut some of this black recess, because it's all molded, and it wouldn't allow me, it was too narrow, it wouldn't allow me to put the fuse in so it would lay flat, and I needed as much room as possible, so I had to cut out little tabs so I could get this to lay flat. Now, as you see, when you put this on, it locks in there, and then where this tab was, you can see, obviously I had to cut it out to be able to put this in. But now when you lay the floor mat in here, I mean, it just barely, maybe 1/16 of an inch is higher than it should be. But as you can see, I tried every which way. This is the only way I could get it to work. So anyway, that's how I did it, and I ran the cable under the seat and then back up to the unit. And of course, like I said, if you take the seat off, this cowling for the brake, you sort of just got to lever it and pull it out. And the T40s, you can only get one. You can only get a wrench on one of these if you're going to do it the way I did it. The other one, luckily, they weren't torqued on too tight, and you could get some skinny nose vice grips, crimp them, and remove them. There's like 3 bolts right under here that goes to the frame of the seat if you wanted to get that seat off. So anyway, that's how I did it. If you would like to subscribe to my channel, I do a lot of artwork and stuff like that, and maybe I'll show you a little bit before I go here. And this is kind of some of the stuff I've done. It's sterling silver, turquoise, stuff like that. Let me see if I got any in here. I got one more case here, and hopefully going to do a show here in the next couple weeks. Some turquoise bracelets there. I got one on right here that I did. So sterling silver and copper, stuff like that. So anyway, be well, be safe, and follow my videos where I built my rig and took my trip, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.